Hello, sleepy thinkers, and welcome to Sleepy Science Teller. I'm so happy you are here tonight, ready to drift into calmness while exploring the wonders of science together. Tonight, we will travel back in time, billions of years ago, to uncover the story of how life began on our planet, the gentle, mysterious, and beautiful origin of life on Earth. It is a tale written not in words, but in oceans and molecules, and in the quiet persistence of nature itself. Before we begin our journey, tell me softly in the comment below where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. It warms my heart to know that people from all over the world share this moment of peace together. And if you find comfort here, please consider gently pressing the like button and subscribing to this channel. Your support allows me to continue bringing you these bedtime discoveries. Every night, close your eyes, my dear listener, and imagine traveling back, not just thousands of years, not even millions of years, but all the way 4.5 billion years ago, to the very dawn of our planet's story. The Earth was newborn, a glowing, restless world. A world that looked nothing like the gentle blue marble we know today. Back then, the surface was molten rock, rivers of fire stretching endlessly across the crust. Volcanoes erupted in constant fury. The air was heavy with poisonous gases, carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and water vapor. A sky painted not with soft clouds, but with swirling storms of ash and dust. There were no oceans yet, no forests, no whisper of life, only heat, chaos, and silence, broken only by the rumbling of a planet still forming its skin. Scientists believe that during these earliest times, the Earth was bombarded by countless asteroids and comets. They rained down from the skies, crashing onto the surface with unimaginable force, each impact releasing enough energy to melt stone and vaporize oceans that try to form. And yet, it was these very impacts that helped shape the Earth. Some carried metals that would sink deep into the core. Others brought precious elements like carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, the ingredients that would one day, much later, make life possible. It is humbling to think of the stage of Earth's life when our planet was so young, still finding its shape, still cooling, still carving the path for everything that would follow. Take a slow breath and picture this fiery, glowing world, a place both violent and strangely beautiful, a place where mountains rose, only to melt back into rivers of lava, where skies thunder with storms of fire and stone, where the surface cracked and shifted endlessly. The Earth was a child, growing painfully, but with purpose. And within this chaos, the first steps toward life were quietly, invisibly beginning. Now, my friend, let us stay in this ancient world a little longer. In the next part, we will sink even deeper into fiery landscapes to see how heat, storms, and cosmic collisions laid the foundation for the life that was still to come. As we remain in this ancient landscape, let us look closer. The Earth, though young, was already a world of stories. Each volcano that erupted, each storm that raged, was writing a line in a book that would one day tell the tale of life. The surface was restless. Great seas of magma stretched across vast plains. Imagine glowing rivers of molten rock, flowing endlessly, glowing red and orange against a dark and smoky sky. The ground hissed and cracked, releasing poisonous gases into the heavy atmosphere. It was a world where stepping onto the ground would have been impossible. Heat shimmered everywhere. The air itself was thick, heavy with steam and toxic chemicals. Lightning flashed often through the dense clouds. Yet all of this chaos and fire, was necessary, for out of these violent beginnings, the building blocks of stability and eventually life were being formed. Scientists believe that the constant volcanic eruptions delivered minerals to the surface. Iron, nickel, and sulfur rose from the depths of Earth's interior. At the same time, water vapor released from these eruptions began to collect in the air. One day, much later, it would fall back down as endless rains, creating oceans. The bombardments from space also continued. Asteroids and comets collided with Earth again and again. To us, this may sound frightening, but to our young planet, it was part of its growth. Comets carried frozen water and organic molecules, tiny seeds of possibility that sprinkled onto the surface as though the universe itself was planting the earliest garden of chemistry. Let us pause here and reflect on the silence that must have existed in between each eruption. In those moments, the earth glowed softly, its horizon red with heat. The stars, though hidden by clouds of ash, still shone faintly above, and beneath it all, the earth turned quietly, patiently in the vastness of space. There were no trees to sway in the wind, no rivers to flow, no birds to sing, only the deep rumble of the planet's heart. And yet, in this silence, something profound was being prepared. Have you ever watched a storm rolling, lightning flashing, thunder echoing, and then felt the calm that follows after? The early Earth was like this, storm upon storm, fire upon fire. But after each, there was a kind of pause, a waiting, as if the planet itself knew that something greater was still to come. Scientists often describe this period as Earth's childhood, a time when it was wild, unruly, and full of raw energy, just like a child who runs and stumbles and grows through every mistake. The Earth, too, was finding balance, slowly, painfully, but with destiny written in its path. Picture yourself standing at the edge of this young world. The ground shakes beneath your feet. The sky glows with fire. And though it feels dangerous, frightening, there is also beauty, the kind of beauty that reminds us that beginnings are often messy, but they hold within them infinite possibilities. This fiery youth of Earth lasted for hundreds of millions of years, a span of time so vast that it is almost impossible for us to imagine, and yet every day, every storm was bringing the planet closer to becoming a place where water could settle, where oceans could form, and where life could gently begin its first whisper. In the next part, we will drift deeper into the timeline of this young Earth and see how, from this fire and chaos, the planet slowly began to cool, preparing the stage for first waters, and the cradle of life that would one day follow. The young Earth continued to change, slowly yet endlessly. The fiery surface that once glowed like an ember began to harden. Little by little, crusts of rock formed, cracked, and reformed again. Each shift, each cooling layer, was a small step toward stability. Imagine the planet as if it were a great glowing coal in the darkness of space. At first, unbearably hot, impossible to touch, but slowly, with time, it cooled, darkened on the outside, while still glowing at its core. This is how our Earth lived billions of years ago. Yet cooling did not mean peace. The planet was restless. Its surface tore open with eruptions, its skies filled with storms. And yet, through all this, a pattern was emerging, a rhythm between destruction and renewal. One day, This rhythm would guide the rise of oceans, climates, and life itself. The atmosphere during this time was heavy and alien. Breathing it would have been impossible for us. But for the Earth, it was perfect. Carbon dioxide kept the world warm. Ammonia, methane, and water vapor swirled together in thick clouds. From far away, Earth might look like a hazy, glowing jewel, spinning slowly against the darkness. Pause here and imagine you are floating just above this young planet. From space, you see its fiery surface. You see flashes of light where meteors crash against the crust. You see ribbons of lava spilling across continents that do not yet exist. And you see storms swirling endlessly, wrapping the planet like a cloak. This is the sight of a world in its youth, a world being written into existence. Scientists often call this early time the Hadean Eon. The word comes from Hades, the ancient Greek underworld, and truly, it was a world of fire and brimstone. But even within this inferno, there was promise, because from fire came minerals, and from storms came chemistry, and from collisions with comets came precious water. It is here, in this fiery youth, that the stage was set. The Earth was not yet ready for life, but it was preparing, layer by layer, element by element. Every eruption, every collision, every storm was a step toward what would someday become forests, oceans, and skies full of life. Think of how a painter begins a masterpiece, not with tiny details, but with bold, sweeping strokes, dark colors laid first, shaping the canvas. The Earth was like this in its first billion years. It painted its canvas with fire and storm, bold, violent strokes that would later be softened by ocean skies and gentle breezes. There's a strange comfort in this thought that even our own world began in chaos, and yet out of that chaos, beauty was born. Perhaps our own lives are not so different. In times of turmoil, we too are being shaped, forged into something stronger, steadier, and ready for new chapters. As millions of years passed, the Earth's surface cooled more deeply, the crust thickened, creating the first stable rocks. Some of these rocks, tiny crystals of zircon, still exist today. They are among the oldest fragments of Earth's story, whispering to us across billions of years about those fiery beginnings. In the silence of the universe, the Earth turned again and again. One day, it would host rivers, mountains, and creatures beyond imagination. But in this moment, it was only preparing, like a deep breath before the first word is spoken, like a heartbeat before the first song begins. And so, as we leave this first chapter, the Earth remains young, fiery, and restless. But soon, the endless rains will fall, oceans will gather, and in their depths, chemistry will begin to stir. The planet will take its next step toward becoming the home of life. As the young Earth slowly aged, its fiery skin began to cool. What was once a restless ocean of lava hardened into the first crust of stone. The glowing rivers of fire grew fewer. Though deep beneath, the planet's core still burned with quiet intensity. The air above remained heavy with vapor. Volcanoes breathed out endless clouds of steam. The sky was thick, gray, and unbroken, and the sun above, though shining, was rarely seen, hidden behind layers of cloud and ash. And then, something remarkable began to happen. For millions of years, the heat of Earth had kept water in the sky, held high as vapor, circling in thick clouds. But as the crust cooled, the air too began to soften, and the vapor could no longer stay aloft. Rain began to fall, not for a day or a week, not even for a year, but for thousands upon thousands of years. Imagine it, the sound of rain fall without pause, filling every valley, every hollow, every crack in the rocky surface. This was not gentle rain as we know it now. These were storms beyond imagination. Lightning flashed across the endless clouds. Thunder rolled, echoing against the barren stone. And yet, the drops kept falling, cool, pure, and unceasing. Slowly, pools began to gather. Pools grew into lakes. Lakes spilled into basins. And in time, oceans spread across the planet, vast, deep, and endless. The earth, once a glowing ember, was now cloaked in water, shimmering under the stormy skies. These first oceans were unlike the ones we know. They were hot, mineral-rich, and restless. Volcanoes beneath the surface boiled the waters. Hydrothermal vents spilled out heat and chemicals. The seas were alive, not with creatures, but with energy and possibility. Pause here for a moment and picture the transformation from a world of fire and stone to a world wrapped in water, from rivers of lava to endless seas stirred by storms. The earth was no longer only a place of destruction. It was becoming a cradle. Scientists often speak of this transformation with wonder because without water, life as we know it would not be possible. Water is gentle, yet powerful. It dissolves minerals, carries nutrients, shapes stone. It is a quiet stage upon which life's drama would soon unfold. These early oceans may have stretched farther than ours today, covering nearly the entire surface of the planet, a vast blue sphere, spinning slowly in the blackness of space. No green lands, no forests, only seas and storms. And yet, from these waters, the first whispers of life would rise. Not yet, not immediately, but the stage was set. The earth had cooled, the rains had fallen, the oceans had formed. And now, chemistry could begin its slow, patient dance. As you breathe slowly with me, imagine standing by those first shores. Though no birds sing and no plants sway, you hear the endless waves rushing against black stone. You feel the mist of rain on your face. And you know, this is the beginning of something profound. In the next part, we will drift closer into these primeval oceans and see how minerals, heat, and storms turn these waters into a primordial soup, the first recipe for life on Earth. The rains continue to fall endlessly, day after day, century after century. The heavens poured water onto the barren world below. At first, the drops sizzled as they touched the still warm stone. But slowly, patiently, the earth grew cooler until the water could rest, gather, and stay. Oceans spread like soft blankets across the surface. Their waves carved at the jagged rocks, smoothing them into round edges. The sound of waves and storms filled the silence of a planet that had never known calm. In these early oceans, the water was not clear, not yet. Instead, it was cloudy, filled with dissolved minerals carried by endless rain and by rivers rushing from the mountains of stone. Iron, sulfur, and carbon compounds swirled together in the currents. It was not water for drinking. It was water for creation. The seas of this young earth were restless. Volcanoes erupted beneath them, releasing bursts of heat and chemicals. Hydrothermal vents bubbled with dark, mineral-rich plumes, spreading warmth into the depths. Each wave, each current, carried ingredients that would one day be part of life itself. Pause and picture the scene. A vast world of gray skies and stormy seas. Lightning flashes across the clouds. Thunder rolls like drums of the heavens. And below, the oceans swell and crash against the bare rocks. It was not peaceful, not gentle, and yet there was a strange beauty in this wild balance. Scientists often compare these early oceans to a kind of laboratory, not built by human hands, but by nature itself, a place where elements could meet, collide, and transform. Every drop of water was alive with energy and potential. Every pool, every tide was an experiment waiting to happen. Consider for a moment, if you could stand on those first rocky shores with the storm overhead, you would hear the roar of thunder, the hiss of boiling water. You would see the lightning striking the surface of the seas, each strike releasing energy into the water, each spark urging molecules to dance, to combine, to form something new. It is soothing to realize that even in the midst of chaos, patterns begin to emerge. Rain falls, water gathers, minerals dissolve, and currents swirl. The earth, without plan or intention, was preparing a recipe for something extraordinary. In these endless oceans, cycles began. Water evaporated into clouds, fell again as rain, returned to the seas. Minerals rose from vents below, then settled again into the depths. Energy sparked, faded, and sparked once more, over and over, in infinite combinations. For millions of years, this process continued, and though it may seem slow to us, to the earth, it was simply the rhythm of its breath. Each wave, each storm was a heartbeat, a steady, patient rhythm, keeping time with the quiet growth of possibility. It was in this water-filled world that the next chapter of life's story was waiting, a chapter where chemistry would take its first steps toward biology. But before that, the oceans themselves had to become richer, deeper, more prepared. As you listen, let yourself drift like a drop of rain into those oceans. Imagine falling from the heavy sky, landing upon the surface of the sea. Sinking softly into the depths, carried by warm currents, you swirl with minerals, with carbon and nitrogen. You float near bubbling vents, where warmth surrounds you, and though you are small, unseen, you are part of something greater. The quiet preparation for the spark of life. The oceans of this world were not just water, they were promise. They were the cradle of what was to come. In the next part, we will dive deeper still into the chemistry of these oceans and discover how they became the primordial soup, the mixture that carried the seeds of life itself. The earth had changed so much already, from a fiery, molten sphere to a world wrapped in endless rains. And now it had become a planet of oceans. Vast seas stretched across the globe. Waves rose and fell, day after day, pulled by the rhythms of wind and storm. The rocky land that broke through the surface was bare, dark, and sharp, but most of the world lay beneath water, shimmering under gray and heavy skies. It is soothing to imagine this. The earth, seen from space, would have looked almost entirely blue, not the calm blue we know today, but a deeper, stormier shade, a planet of water and clouds, swirling endlessly in a cosmic dance. The oceans, though young, began to shape the world around them. They cooled the crust, softened the air, and carved the land. Each wave broke against the rock, eroding it, carrying grains of minerals back into the sea. With every cycle, the oceans became richer in elements. Iron, sulfur, carbon, and nitrogen dissolved into the waters. The seas grew heavy with chemistry, a mixture so complex, so full, that scientists later called it the primordial soup. But We are not yet at that chapter. For now, let us stay here, in this world where the oceans are still forming, still settling, their surfaces stirred by endless storms, their depths warmed by vents far below. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over those first seas. The wind whips against you. Rain falls in sheets across the surface. Lightning dances across the sky. And before you stretches an ocean with no end, no boundaries, only mystery. There were no fish to swim through these waters, no coral reefs to brighten their depths, no birds to fly above them, only silence. And yet, in that silence, there was potential, a quiet hum, as if the planet itself was preparing for a song it had not yet learned to sing. Scientists tell us that water is a universal solvent. It carries, it dissolves, it connects. It is gentle, yet it holds incredible power. And in these early oceans, its power was being revealed. Every wave mixed minerals. Every drop connected atoms. Every current carried possibility. From one place to another, the rains that had once fallen endlessly now became part of a great cycle. Water rose as vapor, drifted into clouds, then fell again as rain, each cycle feeding the oceans, stirring the chemistry, renewing the world. The earth had learned to breathe through its oceans and skies. Pause with me, take a slow breath in and out, and imagine that your breath is like the rhythm of these ancient cycles. Calm, steady, patient, breathing in vapor, breathing out rain, breathing in chemistry, breathing out possibility. The formation of the oceans was not only a change of landscape, it was a beginning of balance. The fiery chaos of the young earth had softened into water and rhythm. The planet was finding its song, slow, deep, and full of promise, and yet the oceans were not peaceful in the way we might picture. They boiled near volcanic vents. They steamed under lightning storms. They churned with tides far stronger than today, because the moon was closer then, pulling the waters more fiercely, and so the seas rose and fell, tugged by gravity, stirred by storm, mixed by fire. But all of this, every tide, every current, was important, for it was through movement, through endless mixing, that chemistry had its chance. Molecules met one another, collided, broke apart, and formed again over and over for millions of years. And so the oceans became not just water, but the stage of creation, the place where a life story was waiting to be written. The earth, once fire, was now water, and soon, within these restless seas, the first sparks of life would begin. Now that the oceans had settled across the face of the earth, a new chapter in the story of life began. The waters, rich with minerals and stirred by storms, became more than just seas. They became a vast natural laboratory. Scientists often call this stage the time of the primordial soup, a phrase that may sound simple, but holds within it the essence of life's beginnings. It was in these oceans, these swirling mixtures of water and elements, that the very first whispers of life began to stir. The term soup is not about food, of course. It is about richness, about a mixture where ingredients blend together. Imagine a great pot filled with endless combinations. The Earth's seas were like this, carrying carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus, each one an essential ingredient, waiting for the right moment, the right spark. When the rains fell, they brought new minerals from the rocks. When rivers flowed, they added even more. When volcanoes erupted beneath the seas, they released gases and heat. And when lightning flashed above, It sent energy racing into water. All of this, over millions of years, created an ocean full of possibilities. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine the scene. Gray clouds stretch endlessly across the sky. Lightning flickers and strikes. Splitting the air, thunder echoes in the distance. And below, the waters bubble and churn, alive, not with creatures, but with potential. Within these oceans, tiny molecules formed. At first, they were simple, just small clusters of atoms, nothing more, but the waves kept them moving, crashing together, breaking apart, and forming again, until slowly, patiently, more complex molecules emerged. Some scientists have compared it to a cosmic kitchen where the earth itself was the chef, the oceans the mixing bowl, the minerals the ingredients, and the storms and lightning the stirring spoon. Day by day, year by year, the recipe grew richer, and though we cannot watch this process directly, we can recreate pieces of it in the laboratory. In the 1950s, two scientists named Stanley Miller and Harold Urey created an experiment. They built a small chamber, filled it with water and gases thought to resemble the early Earth, and then they sent electrical sparks through it, like lightning in a storm. After a few days, they looked inside and found that simple organic molecules had formed, tiny amino acids, the very building blocks of life, proving that the primordial soup could indeed cook up the ingredients of life. Pause with me here. Think of how astonishing this is, that with only water, elements, and energy, nature could build the alphabet of life. Not yet words, not yet sentences, but the letters, waiting to be assembled. It brings comfort, doesn't it? To know that life does not need sudden miracles, but patience, time, and the quiet persistence of nature, just as the earth had waited, cooling, raining, and gathering oceans. Now it was waiting still, mixing, stirring, and preparing for the next step. Imagine drifting as a tiny molecule, floating in these early seas. You are surrounded by countless others, each one bumping against the next. Sometimes you join together, sometimes you break apart, and in this endless dance, new forms appear. Little by little, you are becoming part of something greater. This was the primordial soup, a restless ocean filled with possibility, a place where molecules were born, collided, and learned to combine, not yet alive, but full of the first hints of life's song. In the next part, we will sink even deeper into this ancient ocean to see how these molecules grew more complex and how the soup began to thicken into the first true recipes of life. The oceans of early Earth were more than just water. They were vast cauldrons of chemistry, each drop holding tiny experiments, repeated millions upon millions of times, as though nature itself were quietly testing possibilities. Over centuries and then over ages, patterns began to emerge. At first, the molecules were small and fleeting. They formed and dissolved. They combined and broke apart. But the ocean was endless. The experiments never stopped. And within that endlessness, new levels of complexity arose. Some molecules, like amino acids, carried the seeds of proteins. Others, called nucleotides, carried the seeds of genetic material. On their own, they were simple, but when brought together, they began to create the grammar of life, like letters forming into words, and words dreaming of sentences. Scientists call this stage prebiotic chemistry, a time before life, but not without purpose. It was a time of transition, when the line between the inanimate and the living grew faint and shimmering. If we could walk along the shores of this young world, we might see shallow pools left behind by tides. In these pools, the sun would shine more strongly, the waters would warm, and the molecules inside would be concentrated, like flavors in a reducing sauce. Here, in these tiny ponds, the reactions grew stronger. Amino acids joined to form small chains. Nucleotides linked to form short strands. And slowly, ever so slowly, the ocean was writing its first recipes. Imagine this as a cosmic storybook. Each molecule a letter, each combination a word. Some of the words were meaningless. They dissolved and faded away. But others were useful, stable, and the ocean kept those words, repeating them again and again until they became the foundation of the story of life. In a way, this stage was like dreaming. The earth itself was dreaming possibilities, testing, discarding, and reshaping until a new vision emerged. One of the most enchanting ideas about this time is that the ocean may have been sprinkled with clay minerals, tiny, flat surfaces where molecules could rest. These surfaces acted like pages, giving molecules a place to gather, align, and connect. Some scientists believe that these clays help the first chains of molecules to form. By guiding them gently into place, it is humbling, isn't it? To think that something as small and quiet as clay could help shape the first steps toward life, not through force, not through sudden creation, but through patience, steadiness, and time. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine drifting above this ocean, the waters stretching to every horizon, the waves rolling softly, though storms still pass above. Lightning flickers, striking the surface, and beneath the glow, molecules stir, joining, breaking, and joining again, a dance that will continue for millions of years. The primordial soup was not a single place. It was everywhere, in the shallow pools, in the deep oceans, near volcanic vents, each environment offering different ingredients, different energies, and nature endlessly patient. Explore them all. It was like a grand symphony, with each environment playing a different instrument, together building toward the melody of life. And though these molecules were not alive, they were preparing the stage. They were sketching the outlines of what would one day be cells, organisms, and ecosystems. This was a time of potential, a quiet, unhurried time, as though the earth herself was breathing deeply, gathering strength for what was to come. As we rest in this vision, let us remember that even the greatest complexities begin with small, gentle steps. The primordial soup reminds us that patience and persistence can turn simple beginnings into worlds of meaning. The earth's oceans at this stage were not quiet in their purpose, though to our eyes they may have looked like restless waters under stormy skies. Within them, a hidden rhythm was unfolding, a rhythm that would one day lead to the beating heart of life itself. The molecules drifting in the soup were no longer only simple forms. They were beginning to link into longer, more stable chains, proteins in their earliest whispers, nucleic strands in their tender beginnings. The alphabet of life was learning to write its first sentences. Some of these sentences were fragile, dissolving as soon as they formed, but others lasted longer, repeating their structure again and again. Nature seemed to favor these. The molecules that could survive, that could hold their shape, were given more chances to endure. In this way, the primordial soup was not just a mixture, it was also a teacher, guiding chemistry toward the rules of biology. We might picture the scene. a shallow lagoon warmed by the sun, the tide receding, leaving behind a pool of concentrated water. Within it, thousands of molecules drift, some bind into chains, others float freely. The pool dries slightly under the heat, forcing the molecules closer together, and as the evening rain falls once more, the pool is replenished, the dance begins again, the cycle of drying and refilling. Heating and cooling may have been one of the most important rhythms in the history of our planet. Each change in condition gave molecules new chances to connect, like notes being played in different keys. The music grew richer, more layered, more complete, and yet all of this was happening without intention. There was no hand guiding it, only the quiet laws of physics and chemistry, working together again and again across endless time. Some scientists wonder if deep under the seas, near hydrothermal vents, another theater of chemistry was unfolding. Here, the Earth's heat created rich plumes of minerals, and the waters carried a constant flow of energy. These vents could have provided natural laboratories where molecules gathered, clung to mineral walls, and experimented with new forms. Perhaps, while the shallow seas created one recipe, the deep vents prepared another, and in the harmony of both, the earliest structures of life began to emerge. It is almost like listening to two storytellers, each telling a different version of the same tale, but both leading to the same ending. Life born from the marriage of water, energy, and time. As these molecules became more complex, something extraordinary began to happen. They started to show the faintest hints of self-organization, patterns within patterns, chains folding into shapes, clusters forming pockets, and within those pockets, new reactions taking place. Each step bringing the Earth closer to the first cell-like forms. It is humbling to imagine that all of us, every tree, every bird, every human, can trace our lineage back, not just to ancient creatures, but to molecules floating in a soup billions of years ago. The primordial soup was, in truth, the cradle of potential, not yet life, but not entirely lifeless either. It was a dream before the awakening, the twilight before dawn, and from that twilight, a spark will soon come. So as we leave this chapter behind, let us carry the vision of that endless ocean, its surface shimmering with storms and sunlight, its depths alive with invisible experiments, a world waiting patiently for the first true breath of life. The oceans of early Earth were filled with molecules drifting, colliding, and combining. But to transform those molecules into something more, energy was needed. Energy to break bonds, energy to form new ones, energy to awaken chemistry into something closer to life. On the young Earth, energy was not scarce. It was everywhere, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, sometimes steady, sometimes violent. Each form of energy became a spark for possibility. Perhaps the most dramatic of all was lightning. The skies above the primordial Earth were rarely calm. The atmosphere was thick with gases, stirred by storms, heated by the sun, and across this restless sky, lightning danced, flashing, splitting the heavens, striking the waters below. Each strike released a burst of energy, enough to shatter molecules apart, and in the same instant, encourage them to recombine in new ways. It was a wild alchemy, a cosmic forge, turning simple gases into the building blocks of life. Scientists often point to lightning as a key actor because it provides not only heat but raw electrical power. Electricity can rearrange atoms, force them into new partnerships. And in the endless storms of early Earth, this was happening millions of times across oceans and land. Again and again, molecules were split, reformed, and reborn. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of this ancient sea. Dark clouds roll above. The air smells of sulfur and rain. Suddenly a flash, a bolt of lightning tears across the sky. It strikes the water with a hiss, and beneath the surface, molecules tremble. Some break apart into smaller pieces. Some fuse together into larger ones. And in that instant, something entirely new is born. It may seem chaotic, but within that chaos lay creativity. The storm was not destroying. It was reshaping. It was giving the ocean more words to write with, more letters to build the language of life. But lightning was not the only source of energy. The sun itself poured down light upon the seas. Ultraviolet rays, far stronger than what we feel today, struck the surface of the water, breaking molecules, exciting reactions. The young Earth had no protective ozone layer, so sunlight reached the surface with immense force, perhaps too strong for creatures to endure, but perfect for chemistry, perfect for building something new. At the same time, deep within the earth, volcanoes rumbled, spewing heat, gases, and molten rock. Every eruption released energy into the atmosphere and oceans, adding yet more sparks to the global experiment. And in the depths of the seas, hydrothermal vents gushed, sending out superheated water, rich in minerals, a steady, constant source of energy, where molecules could gather and dance in endless cycles. It is remarkable to think that the very forces we sometimes fear, storms, lightning, radiation, eruptions, were, in their ancient forms, the bringers of possibility. They were the sculptors, carving raw elements into shapes of promise. The famous Miller-Urey experiment reminds us of this truth. When scientists simulated the early Earth, they added water, gases, and sparks of electricity, and what emerged were amino acids, proof that energy, when channeled through simple ingredients, could create the letters of life. If the oceans were the great mixing bowl, then energy was the stirring hand. Without it, the soup would have remained still, but with it, the soup began to shimmer, to froth, to create. Pause here for a moment and picture the scene in your mind. The sky alive with lightning, the seas restless with waves, the deep earth breathing heat into the waters, and the sun painting it all with light. This was the orchestra of energy, each player adding its sound to the symphony, a symphony that would one day become life. The early Earth was a planet alive with power. Everywhere one turned, there were sources of energy, each one shaping the primordial soup in its own unique way, and together they formed the great stage upon which life's first sparks could appear. We often think of lightning as a sudden, fleeting flash, a moment of brightness in the dark. But in those ancient times, lightning was not rare. It was constant. The skies were thick with storms, clouds heavy with gases, the atmosphere restless, and lightning split the heavens over and over again. What seems to us a dramatic event was, in that age, as common as the rising sun. Each strike brought energy into the seas, energy that molecules could use. Each flash another opportunity for bonds to break and for new ones to form. It was as if the planet itself was whispering, "Try again, try something new, see what else is possible." But lightning was only one voice. Another voice was the steady hum of the sun. Its rays poured onto the oceans, unfiltered by any ozone layer. Ultraviolet light reached the waters with force unimaginable today. And yet, this fierce sunlight may have been exactly what was needed to drive reactions that built new molecules, to energize chains that might otherwise have fallen apart. Picture it, the surface of the seas, shimmering under an intense golden glow, the water not only reflecting the light, but absorbing it. The molecules were then stirred into action, some destroyed, yes, but others transformed. And in that transformation, new steps toward life were taken. Then there was heat. Volcanoes dotted the young earth, their eruptions painting the skies with ash and fire. Each eruption released gases, carbon dioxide, methane, hydrogen sulfide, all of which drifted into the atmosphere, into the seas, feeding the chemical mixtures with new ingredients. While the heat itself drove reactions forward and far below the waves, hydrothermal vents opened like cracks in the seafloor. They poured out superheated water, rich with minerals. Iron, sulfur, and other elements swirled into the surrounding ocean. These vents offered something rare, not just energy, but a steady flow of it, not just heat, but surfaces where molecules could cling, gather, and react. Some scientists believe that these very vents could have been the cradles of life, safe havens where the dance of molecules turned into the first whispers of cells. Imagine yourself drifting in that deep water. The ocean above is dark, but around you, the vents glow softly, streams of shimmering minerals flowing like ribbons in the currents. Tiny molecules swirl around, clinging to the vent walls, combining, breaking, and forming again. And as the vents breathe, so too does the chemistry of life. In truth, energy was a sculptor of possibility. It gave the primordial soup not only motion, but direction. Without energy, the oceans would have been a silent mixture, but with it, they became alive with potential. Every strike of lightning, every beam of sunlight, every burst of volcanic fire was another brushstroke on the canvas of creation. We can see the echoes of this truth even today. For every living thing requires energy. Plants gather light from the sun. Animals draw nourishment from food. Deep-sea creatures still thrive near vents, using chemical energy in the dark. It is as if life remembers its beginnings, carrying the memory of lightning, sunlight, and heat within every cell that lives now. Pause here and think of how extraordinary this is, that the same lightning we see in summer storms once helped shape the molecules that would become life, that the same sun that warms us now once struck the seas with the energy to awaken chemistry, that the same earth beneath our feet once roared with fire and heat, and in doing so prepared the way for us to exist. In this way, energy was not only power, it was promise. It was a force that transformed stillness into movement, potential into action, chemistry into biology. The early Earth was a world alive with power, a world where storms never ceased, and energy flowed in ways both violent and subtle. To understand how life arose, we must remember this energy, for it was a great enabler, the unseen hand that allowed molecules to do more than exist. It allowed them to change, to grow, to dream of life. Lightning is perhaps the most striking image. Imagine again those endless skies, dark, rolling clouds swirling above the oceans, flashes of white tearing across the heavens, each bolt carrying millions of volts, enough to break apart the simplest of gases, and then, just as quickly, to forge new ones. In the instant of a strike, nitrogen could split from the air, hydrogen could fuse with carbon, simple molecules could be rearranged into something more. It was nature's own laboratory, a forceful, chaotic chemistry, but one that opened doors that had been closed. The oceans, meanwhile, were ready to receive. Each strike fed the waters with new molecules, amino acids, sugars, and other organic pieces, each one a step closer to the alphabet of life. And though the molecules were tiny, they were many, struck again and again across millions of years, until the seas themselves became rich, a broth no longer empty, but flavored with possibility. And then there was sunlight. Today, the sun warms us gently, its rays filtered by the protective shield of the ozone layer. But in those distant times, no such shield existed. Ultraviolet light struck the earth with fierce intensity. What would harm us now was then a gift, breaking apart molecules in the atmosphere and driving reactions on the surface of the seas. Some of these reactions created destructive bursts, but others built the precursors of life. And over time, the balance favored growth. Light became a teacher, not of stability, but of creativity, encouraging molecules to try again and again and again until the right patterns appeared. The earth itself was also a giver of energy. Volcanoes erupted endlessly, their heat pouring into the skies, their gases feeding into the soup of the atmosphere. Carbon, sulfur, hydrogen, all essential pieces, rushed from the heart of the earth into the waiting oceans, and with every eruption came new opportunities for chemistry. But perhaps most enchanting of all were the deep-sea hydrothermal vents. These places, hidden far from sunlight, provided a steady rhythm of energy, not sudden, not violent, but constant like a heartbeat. The vents spewed hot water laced with minerals that offered surfaces for molecules to gather, small pockets where reactions could repeat endlessly. Some scientists believe that these vents may have been the true cradle of life, for they offered not just power, but shelter, not just heat, but stability, and within their quiet, mineral-lined chambers, molecules may have found their first true homes. It is humbling to think that life may have begun not in sunlight, but in darkness, not in calm, but in fire, nurtured by the very breath of the planet itself. All these energy sources, lightning, sunlight, volcanoes, vents, work together as a great chorus, each one adding its own note, each one repeating across ages, until the ocean was no longer just water and minerals. It was a sea of possibility, rich with building blocks, awaiting the next leap forward. And as we listen to this story, we may recognize something familiar. For life, even now, still depends on energy. Every cell in our bodies is powered by tiny sparks. Every heartbeat, every breath, is the echo of that ancient truth. Energy is the thread that connects the first molecules to us today, a reminder that we are not separate from the storms and fires of the earth, but born of them. So let us linger on this vision. The stormy skies, alive with lightning, the golden rays of a fierce young sun, the rumble of volcanoes, painting the air with heat, the glow of vents, deep in the dark ocean. Together, they formed a world of energy, and through that energy, life was given its first breath of possibility. The oceans of early Earth had been stirred by energy, lightning flashing across the skies, sunlight pouring into the waters, volcanoes rumbling, and vents glowing in the deep. And in this restless yet patient world, something new began to emerge. From the dance of elements and the touch of energy came molecules, not just simple gases, not just fragments of atoms, but organic molecules, the earliest whispers of chemistry that would one day give rise to biology. Organic molecules are, in essence, the building blocks of life, tiny pieces that can be assembled into larger structures, the way letters come together to form words, and words to form sentences. Without them, life cannot exist. With them, life becomes possible. The first of these were likely amino acids, small molecules built from carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, each one delicate yet essential, for amino acids are the seeds of proteins, and proteins are the workers of life, shaping, folding, and carrying out the tasks that sustain living things. Alongside them came nucleotides, molecules that would one day weave into RNA and DNA, the blueprint of life. Nucleotides are like tiny puzzle pieces, each one able to connect with another and together to carry information, a code written not in ink, but in chemistry. Sugars, too, began to appear, simple chains of carbon and hydrogen that could provide energy and form part of the backbone for nucleic acids. And lipids, molecules with one end that loves water and another that fears it, emerged as well. These would later shape the very walls of cells, delicate barriers that could protect and hold life within. All of this in oceans once thought barren, but now revealed as rich, creative laboratories, a place where the alphabet of life was slowly being written. Imagine this process. Raindrops fall into a tide pool, bringing minerals from the land. Lightning flashes, sending energy into the shallow waters. The molecules inside stir, shift, and combine, and after countless cycles of drying and refilling, a few new forms remain. Amino acids, nucleotides, sugars, lipids, each fragile, each fleeting, but together they are the beginnings of life's first toolkit. It is important to remember these molecules were not alive. They could not think, they could not move on their own, and yet they carried within them the possibility of life. For from them, all the complexity of biology could one day unfold. We might compare this stage to a child learning letters. At first, the letters seem meaningless, but soon they combine into words, and the words into sentences, until finally meaning appears. In the same way, these simple molecules were the letters, awaiting the time when nature would arrange them into the first living words. Pause for a moment and imagine floating in this ocean. You drift among countless molecules. Some are small, fleeting things. Others are chains, longer and more stable. The water around you carries energy from the sun, from the earth, from the sky, and with every pulse of energy, molecules shift, break, and reform. Each moment a chance for something new. Each second another step along the quiet path to life. The creation of these simple molecules was not the end. It was the beginning, the foundation on which all else would be built. From amino acids came proteins. From nucleotides came genetic codes. From sugars came energy and structure. From lipids came membranes. And together they formed the toolkit, the instruments that the earth would soon play in the grand symphony of life. The story of simple organic molecules is, in truth, the story of potential, for while they may appear small, even ordinary, their shapes, their bonds, and their patterns hold secrets that would one day allow life to unfold. Let us begin with amino acids. Imagine them as tiny beads, each with a head and a tail, each bead slightly different in character. Some shy, some bold, some drawn to water, some pulling away. When strung together, these beads form chains, and when the chains fold, twist, and bend, they create proteins, the versatile workers of life. Proteins build structures, speed up reactions, and sense the world. But before they became these powerful tools, they began as simple amino acids drifting in a warm, ancient sea. How might they have formed? One answer comes from experiments such as the famous Miller-Urey experiment. In the 1950s, scientists recreated the conditions of early Earth. They filled a chamber with gases thought to be present in the young atmosphere: methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor. They sparked it with electricity, simulating lightning, and within days, amino acids appeared. This was a profound discovery, a glimpse into the possibility that life's building blocks could emerge naturally from nothing more than chemistry and energy. But amino acids were only one part of the story. Alongside them came nucleotides, small, elegant molecules made of three parts: a sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. Together, these could link into chains that carried information, instructions for building. For nucleotides were the ancestors of RNA and DNA, and without them, life would lack memory, inheritance, and instruction. Picture a strand of nucleotides forming in those ancient waters, each base pairing with its partner: adenine with uracil and RNA, or adenine with thymine and DNA, guanine with cytosine, like the rhythm of a dance, like two hands fitting together. These pairings became the key to carrying a message across time, a whisper written in chemistry, waiting to be read by future life. And then there were sugars, simple rings of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. They were more than sweetness. They were structure and fuel, providing energy in the form of glucose, supporting nucleotides through ribose and deoxyribose. And beyond energy, sugars could link into long chains: starch, cellulose, glycogen, that one day would serve as storage, scaffolding, and strength. But in the beginning, they were simply tiny rings floating in the sea, each one a spark of possibility. Lipids, too, joined the story. Strange molecules with dual natures. One end loved water, reaching toward it. The other feared it, turning away. And so, when placed in water, lipids arranged themselves into layers, sheets and bubbles, hollow spheres we now call vesicles. These simple arrangements were the ancestors of membranes, delicate barriers that could separate the inside from the outside. And with membranes, the possibility of cells began to appear. For without a boundary, life cannot hold itself, but with one it may protect, grow, and change. Think of it, the young Earth's oceans filled with these simple molecules: amino acids, nucleotides, sugars, lipids, each one forming, breaking, and reforming, each one playing its part in the quiet laboratory of the seas. And as they mingled, they found each other: chains of amino acids, strands of nucleotides, clusters of lipids, random, unplanned, and yet not meaningless. Every so often, an arrangement proved more stable, lasting longer than the rest. And each stable form, each tiny success, was another step toward the birth of life. Pause here and imagine yourself holding a tiny droplet of that ancient sea. Inside are molecules shifting, colliding, combining. The droplet glows faintly as lightning flashes above. The molecules within dance in the warmth. Some vanish as quickly as they form, but others linger, and those that linger remain to build something greater. Scientists believe this process took not years, not centuries, but millions of years. Patiently, quietly, the oceans turned chemistry into biology, brick by brick, bond by bond, until finally the toolkit of life was ready, all built from these humble molecules. And yet, this was not life itself. This was still only preparation, a stage setting, a gathering of pieces. Life, in its truest sense, still waited to be born. The story of simple organic molecules is like the opening notes of a long symphony, delicate, patient, and understated, but essential for the music that would follow. By now, the oceans of the early Earth were no longer just water and stone. They were seas filled with whispers of potential, amino acids, nucleotides, sugars, and lipids, all drifting, all waiting, all capable of becoming something greater. Let's imagine how these molecules may have interacted. Picture shallow pools along a coastline. The sun warms them by day, and by night they cool and concentrate. Water evaporates, leaving behind salts and molecules. And when the rains return, the pools refill. This cycle repeats again and again, millions upon millions of times. And with each cycle, molecules are brought together, arranged, reshaped, and tested. Most vanish, broken by heat or dissolved into the sea. But some remain, stable enough to last, and in lasting to combine with others. This process, though slow, had profound consequences. Amino acids that survived could link into short chains, peptides, the beginning of proteins, tiny strings of activity. Some could fold into shapes that made them more stable. Others could cling to minerals in the environment. Clays, for example, may have acted like tiny scaffolds, helping molecules to stick, to align, and to join, turning chance into opportunity. Nucleotides, meanwhile, may have aligned on surfaces, clays and minerals, guiding them into strands. Each strand fragile, but each one carrying the potential to copy, to pair, to hold information. Already, the language of life was stirring, though not yet spoken, a silent code waiting for a reader. Sugars added another note to this quiet music. They offered energy that could be released when bonds were broken, and they provided structure, support for nucleotides, and strength for the earliest molecules that would one day form cell walls. And lipids, those remarkable molecules with two personalities, continue to shape themselves into vesicles. Imagine them forming tiny bubbles, each one trapping water and molecules inside, each bubble fragile yet protective. For the first time, chemistry was not only happening in the open sea, but inside sheltered spaces, spaces that might one day resemble the insides of cells. Pause for a moment and picture it. Countless vesicles floating in the oceans, each one a tiny world, carrying amino acids, nucleotides, sugars. Some break apart quickly, others survive a little longer, and every bubble that survives is a small step toward the miracle of life. The fascinating truth is this: simple organic molecules alone do not create life, but they create the conditions, the foundation. Without them, life cannot exist. With them, life becomes possible. They are like the clay in a potter's hands, shapeless at first, but ready to be molded into something enduring. Scientists often reflect on how abundant these molecules might have been were the oceans filled with them. or were they rare jewels scattered here and there? Some theories suggest they may have come not only from Earth, but from space itself. Meteorites, carrying amino acids and organic compounds, falling through the skies into the young oceans. If true, then life's building blocks may not belong solely to Earth, but to the cosmos itself, making life a universal possibility. This idea is both humbling and comforting, to think that the same molecules that once drifted in Earth's seas may also drift among the stars, and that wherever they gather, they may one day begin the same slow, patient journey toward life. Let us linger in this thought for a while. Amino acids stringing together, nucleotides forming fragile chains, sugars storing energy, lipids building protective bubbles, each molecule small, but together laying the groundwork for everything to come. And in this quiet, gradual unfolding, we begin to see the profound truth. Life is not a sudden spark, but a patient weaving of countless threads that began with the simplest molecules, arranging, combining, waiting, until finally the first true structures of life could emerge. The Earth, after billions of years of quiet preparation, was ready for another transformation, one that would change not only the oceans, but the sky above, a change that would give breath to every future creature, and paint the world in colors it had never known before. This transformation began with photosynthesis, the process by which simple organisms learn to capture sunlight and turn its energy into food. Before this, life on Earth was limited, small, simple cells fed by chemical reactions around them, drawing energy from the environment in quiet, hidden ways. But sunlight, the most abundant energy source of all, waited, untapped, filling every wave, every drop of water, every surface of land. It was everywhere, streaming across the planet each day. And when life discovered how to capture it, everything began to change. The earliest organisms to master this skill were cyanobacteria, tiny microscopic beings, barely visible even under a microscope, and yet within their delicate structures lay a revolutionary ability. They possessed pigments, molecules that could absorb light, especially chlorophyll, a pigment still present in every green leaf today. With these pigments, cyanobacteria capture the energy of sunlight, using it to split water molecules, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. Imagine the oceans then, teeming with these small, unseen workers, each one taking in sunlight, each one quietly releasing oxygen. At first, the oxygen dissolved into seas, mixing with minerals, reacting with iron, turning the oceans a rusty red as iron oxides formed and sank to the seabed. Layer upon layer, this rust built up, still visible today as banded iron formations in ancient rocks. But soon, the oceans could hold no more, and oxygen began to spill into the atmosphere. At first, only a trace, barely detectable, but slowly, patiently, over millions of years, it grew until the very air of Earth was transformed. This event is known as the Great Oxidation Event, and it was one of the most dramatic shifts in Earth's history. For oxygen is not only a byproduct, it is a tool, a key, a spark, a molecule that allows energy to be released quickly and efficiently. With oxygen, life could grow larger, more active, more complex. The stage was being set for creatures that would one day breathe, for forests, for animals, for us. But in the beginning, it was not so simple. For oxygen, while life given to us, was toxic to many of the early organisms. They had evolved in a world without it, and its presence disrupted their delicate chemistries. For some, oxygen was deadly, entire lineages perished in its rise, but others adapted, evolving new ways to live in this new atmosphere. And in doing so, they gained access to powerful energy. They learned to breathe oxygen, to use it in their own processes, and with this, life stepped into a new age. Pause here and imagine drifting to the seas of this time. Above you, sunlight dances through the water. Around you, tiny cyanobacteria float, glowing faintly green, each one capturing light, each one releasing oxygen. The water grows richer with each passing day, and the air above begins to shift from a thin, alien mix to the breathable sky that you and I now share. Photosynthesis did more than create oxygen. It also provided food, glucose, a simple sugar, produced by cyanobacteria and later by plants, with sunlight as fuel. Life no longer needed to depend solely on harsh environments like vents or minerals. It could spread, expand, and flourish wherever the sun reached. Photosynthesis gave Earth abundance, and oxygen gave Earth breath. The rise of oxygen on Earth was not a quiet event. It was a revolution, slow in its unfolding, yet immense in its impact. A change so profound that it altered the chemistry of the planet itself. When cyanobacteria first began releasing oxygen, the oceans absorbed it eagerly, for in those early seas, iron was plentiful, floating as dissolved ions, unseen, uncolored, but when oxygen touched it, the iron oxidized, forming rust, flakes and particles that settled to the ocean floor, layer upon layer, building great bands of iron-rich rock. These banded iron formations, striped red and gray, still exist today, silent records of the time when oxygen began its steady rise. But eventually, the iron ran low, and oxygen could no longer be hidden away in the oceans. It began to accumulate in the air, turning the skies into something Earth had never known before, an atmosphere rich with oxygen. This change reshaped the very surface of the planet. Minerals that had never existed before now formed, as oxygen interacted with elements across the Earth. Rocks weathered differently, volcanoes vented into a new atmosphere, and deep underground, the chemistry of the planet was forever altered, yet as oxygen rose, it brought both opportunity and danger. For the simple, early organisms that had evolved in oxygen-free seas, this new molecule was poison. Its reactive nature damaged their fragile systems, breaking apart their chemistry, ruining their balance. Many could not survive, and whole lineages of ancient microbes vanished. It was, in many ways, a mass extinction, a hidden tragedy in the deep history of life. But others found a way to adapt. Some retreated into oxygen-free environments, deep in the mud, inside rocks, or near volcanic vents, places where oxygen could not reach. There, they continued quietly, surviving in small pockets. Even to this day, others, though, took a bold step forward. They learned not only to survive oxygen, but to use it, to harness its power for themselves. This was the beginning of aerobic respiration, a process that allowed cells to release far more energy from food. With oxygen as a partner, they could unlock stores of energy with far greater efficiency. And this energy made possible new growth, new forms, new levels of complexity. Pause here and imagine the oceans in this time. The waters shimmer with life. Cyanobacteria floating in vast blooms, turning sunlight into sugar, oxygen bubbling from their tiny forms, rising through the water, drifting into the sky. All around, other organisms adapt or perish. Some retreat into shadows. Others begin to breathe the new air, and above, the sky slowly transforms. Clearer, brighter, washed in a blue it had never shown before. For oxygen did something else remarkable, high in the atmosphere. Some of it turned into ozone, a delicate shield that absorbed harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Before this, the Earth's surface was bathed in intense radiation, making land a harsh, dangerous place for life. But with ozone, the skies became gentler. Life could begin to imagine leaving the oceans, to one day reach the land. The great oxidation event, then, was more than a change in chemistry. It was a turning point in possibility, a preparation for everything to come. With oxygen in the air, life was no longer confined to simple forms. It could grow, expand, and explore new paths. And yet, this transformation took time, millions upon millions of years. The oxygen levels rose, fell, and rose again, balancing between volcanic gases, ocean chemistry, and life itself. It was not a sudden leap, but a slow climb, a steady reshaping of the world, until, at last, the Earth had entered a new age, an age where oxygen was abundant, and the stage was set for multicellular life. By now, oxygen had become more than a trace. It was a force, a presence that touched the seas, the rocks, and the very air above. The great oxidation event had begun its quiet work, and with it, the world itself was being rewritten. Let us pause and think of what this really means. Without oxygen, life remains small, cells struggling in quiet, hidden places, limited by the little energy they can draw from their surroundings. But with oxygen, a door opened, energy could be released in far greater amounts. Life could dream of being larger, of joining together, of building complexity, and slowly, that dream began to take form. The first beneficiaries of this oxygen-rich world were the very organisms that made it, the cyanobacteria. For not only did they release oxygen, but they also fed themselves through photosynthesis, creating sugars with the help of sunlight. They spread across the oceans, forming vast mats known as stromatolites, layer upon layer of living communities, some of which still survive today. Ancient echoes of that first great age of oxygen. As they grew, other organisms began to follow. Some learned to consume these cyanobacteria, finding nourishment in their sugars. Others learned to live in partnership with them, and in time, this partnership grew so close that one cell took another inside and never let it go. This was the beginning of chloroplasts, the tiny green engines inside plant cells today. Long ago, they were free-living cyanobacteria, but once engulfed, they became part of larger cells, sharing their gift of photosynthesis with their hosts. This moment of cooperation was one of the most important in all of evolution, for it gave rise to algae and eventually to plants, organisms that would transform not only the oceans, but the very continents of Earth. Pause and imagine a shoreline of the ancient world. The seas are filled with drifting algae, green and golden, soaking up sunlight, releasing oxygen in endless streams. The air above is richer, the sky is clearer, the winds carrying oxygen far and wide. The Earth is no longer a barren, alien sphere. It is becoming the world we know, alive with color and breath. But oxygen's story did not end with its abundance. It continued to shape the course of life. For with oxygen came fire, the ability of organic matter to burn, a power that reshaped landscapes and ecosystems. With oxygen came new forms of metabolism, cells learning to breathe deeply, to unlock the full power of their food. And with oxygen came the possibility of large, active creatures, able to move, hunt, grow, and evolve into endless forms. Yet the rise of oxygen was not always steady. At times, its levels dipped, falling during great climatic changes, when ice covered much of the planet, or when volcanic eruptions choked the skies. At other times, oxygen spiked, rising to levels even higher than today, making insects grow enormous, and fueling lush forests that stretched across the continents. The balance of oxygen and life became a dance, each shaping the other, each guiding the path of evolution. Think of it this way: every breath you take today, every beat of your heart, every leaf that shimmers in the sunlight owes its existence to that ancient shift, the moment life discovered photosynthesis, and oxygen became part of the world. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine breathing the first true breath of oxygen. Imagine standing in a world where the air is fresh, the skies are blue, and the seas are alive with green. That breath connects you not only to the present, but to billions of years of history, to cyanobacteria floating in quiet oceans, to algae spreading across ancient seas, to forests rising on land, and to the animals that would one day breathe as you do. Photosynthesis and oxygen together were the turning point. They gave the earth its atmosphere. They gave life its energy. They gave us our breath. By the time oxygen had filled the skies and seas, the earth had already been alive for billions of years. But something new was stirring, a shift from the simple to the complex, from tiny single-celled beings to creatures made of many cells, working together in harmony. This was the beginning of the path to complex life, the road that would one day lead to forests, oceans filled with animals, and eventually to us. Let us begin with the single cells. For countless ages, life had been microscopic, bacteria and archaea drifting in the seas, each living alone, each carrying out all of life's tasks within a single wall. They were remarkable, yes, but they were limited. There's only so much one cell can do by itself. The key to complexity was cooperation, and the first step on this path was endosymbiosis, a word that means living together within. Long ago, some single-celled organisms began to take others inside. Instead of digesting them, they formed partnerships. One cell gave protection, the other gave energy or skills, and together they were stronger. This is how mitochondria came to be, tiny powerhouses inside nearly every complex cell today. Once, they were free-living bacteria, capable of using oxygen to release vast amounts of energy, but when they were taken inside larger cells, they stayed, they became part of their host, and in time, inseparable from it, the host cell gained a powerful new source of energy, and the mitochondria gained shelter and stability. It was a partnership so successful that it still exists within every one of your cells today. Pause here and imagine looking deep inside yourself. Within each of your cells are hundreds, even thousands of mitochondria, little echoes of ancient bacteria, still humming softly, still releasing energy, still keeping you alive Every breath you take, every step you walk, every thought you think is powered by them. An ancient alliance, still unbroken after more than 1 billion years. But mitochondria were only the beginning. In some lineages, cyanobacteria were also taken inside larger cells, and they became chloroplasts, the green engines of photosynthesis within plants and algae. This was another great partnership, for with chloroplasts, cells could harvest sunlight directly. They no longer needed to depend only on food from the outside. They could make their own, and with this, life spread in new directions, painting the oceans green, and later, turning the continents into forests. These partnerships, mitochondria and chloroplasts, were the foundations of eukaryotic cells, cells with nuclei, cells with organelles, cells far more complex than any that had come before, and from them, the path to multicellularity opened. At first, multicellularity was simple, cells stuck together, living as colonies, but slowly, over time, these colonies grew more specialized. Some cells began to take on different roles, some for movement, some for feeding, some for reproduction, and as these roles grew more distinct, the first true multicellular organisms appeared. Pause. And imagine an ancient ocean filled with these new beings, delicate filaments of algae drifting in the currents, small clusters of cells glowing faintly in the sunlight, tiny jelly-like creatures pulsing slowly in the dark, each one a community, a cooperation of many cells, working together as one. This was the beginning of complexity, the first step from the simple to the extraordinary. And though it may have seemed small, it carried within it the promise of all that was to come, the rise of plants, the branching of animals, the endless shapes of life that would one day cover the earth. Once the first multicellular organisms had taken shape, the earth's oceans began to shimmer with new possibilities. Life was no longer limited to single cells drifting alone. It was now a chorus, a collaboration, many voices blending together into one living body. At first, these early multicellular forms were fragile, simple clusters of cells, barely more than colonies, with only a hint of organization. But over time, something magical began to unfold. Cells learned to divide tasks among themselves, to specialize, to trust one another, and with specialization came efficiency, and with efficiency came growth. Imagine a cluster of cells, floating gently in the ancient seas. At the beginning, each cell is the same, each one able to do everything, to take in nutrients, to sense its surroundings, to reproduce, but slowly a shift begins. Some cells take on the role of feeding, gathering energy for the group. Others become structural, holding the colony together, shaping it into something more than a drifting clump. Still others focus on reproduction, ensuring the survival of future generations. This sharing of tasks was revolutionary. For the first time in Earth's history, individual cells were no longer just living for themselves. They were living for the whole, and in doing so, they discovered strength. Together, they could grow larger, adapt better, and survive challenges that no single cell could face alone. This was the true birth of multicellularity, a moment so subtle in appearance, and yet so profound in consequence. It was the turning of a page in life's great story, and with it, evolution had a new canvas to paint upon. The oceans began to bloom with diversity, filaments of algae stretching like threads through the water, tiny spheres of green cells, floating like emerald pearls in the sunlight, delicate sheets of tissue-like colonies, fluttering in the currents, all of them experimenting with new forms, new strategies, new ways of being alive. In time, the experiments grew bolder. Some multicellular beings began to move, not simply drifting with the waves, but swimming, pulsing, gliding under their own power. This was the earliest hint of animals, simple at first, but filled with promise, the ancestors of sponges, of corals, of jellyfish, each one a small spark, lighting the way toward the wonders yet to come. Pause here and imagine yourself sinking into those ancient seas. The water is clear, lit softly by the sun above. Around you drift countless shapes, filaments, clusters, globes of living cells. Some are still, others quiver with gentle movement. It is a world quiet and simple, yet brimming with potential, the calm before a great unfolding. And then, slowly, the great unfolding began. The rise of multicellularity was not just about form. It was also about communication. Cells had to learn to talk to one another, to send signals, to share information. Chemical whispers passed from one cell to the next, messages of growth, messages of repair, messages of cooperation, and as these whispers grew more complex, the bodies they guided grew more intricate as well. Think of it as an orchestra. At first, each instrument played alone, unaware of the others, but now they were learning to listen, to harmonize, to create a melody greater than any single sound. And as the symphony grew, so too did the possibilities of life. This period in Earth's history was the opening act of complexity, still simple compared to what would follow, but already holding within it the seeds of all future diversity, the forests of plants, the kingdoms of animals, the rise of intelligence. All of these would one day spring. From these fragile beginnings, the path to complex life was not a sudden leap, but a gradual climb, step by step, change by change, each one small, but together building the foundation for all that would come. And so, as the ancient seas filled with these new experiments, the earth was preparing itself for its first great explosion of diversity, an event that would forever change the story of life on this planet. The earth was ready, the seas were filled with promise, and the stage was set for something extraordinary, a burst of creativity, a blossoming of life, so profound that scientists call it the Cambrian explosion. For billions of years, life had been simple, tiny cells, and later small colonies, drifting quietly in the oceans. But then, around 540 million years ago, the world changed. In a relatively short span of geological time, life discovered new shapes, new strategies, new ways of being alive. Creatures with skeletons appeared, protecting themselves, growing stronger, eyes open for the first time, allowing animals to see the world around them, limbs stretched out, bodies learned to crawl, to swim, to burrow. Predators and prey emerged, and with them, the first arms race of life. Imagine standing on the shore of an ancient sea. The water sparkles in the sun, but beneath the surface, an alien world is awakening. Trilobites crawl across the ocean floor, their hard shells gleaming. Strange, worm-like creatures swim by, darting quickly to escape larger hunters. Jelly-like forms drift in the currents, while armored beings snap their jaws in pursuit. It is a world teeming with activity, a sudden orchestra of movement, color, and survival. This explosion of life was made possible by everything that came before: the rise of oxygen, the power of mitochondria, the partnerships of cells, the cooperation of colonies. Each step prepared the way, each thread woven carefully into the tapestry. And now, the tapestry was beginning to show its full pattern. From this point onward, the path to complexity never truly slowed. Fish filled the seas, plants crept onto land, insects learned to fly, forests rose toward the skies, and slowly, steadily, life grew more intricate, more diverse, more astonishing. Even as we whisper these words, the story continues. Every bird in the sky, every flower in bloom, every person walking the earth today is part of the same grand thread, a single story stretching back to those ancient molecules in the primordial soup, to the sparks of lightning, to the whispers of RNA, to the first cells, to the first breaths of oxygen. And so we arrive here, billions of years later, able to look back with wonder and forward with hope. The path to complex life was never straightforward, never certain, and yet through patience, through persistence, through endless cycles of trial and change, life found its way, all the way to you, to this moment, to this quiet night where you drift into sleep, to the sound of its story. Close your eyes now and carry with you the knowledge that you are part of this miracle, that your every breath, your every heartbeat is a continuation of a journey that began long before the stars. Look down on Earth's first oceans. May your dreams tonight be filled with the soft rhythms of life, with oceans and forests, with ancient skies, and with the quiet hum of creation. And so, dear listener, I thank you for walking this long path with me, for letting the story of life flow gently into your evening. Until we meet again, I wish you peace. I wish you rest. Good night and goodbye.